Hello, and welcome to the Raising Risk-Free Teens podcast. I'm your host, Cheryl LaBelle. In this risky world we live in today, we want to equip parents to help their teens avoid unnecessary risk. We'll touch on hot topics of the current culture. We'll talk about sexual risk avoidance and any other important information to keep you informed as a parent. All of our topics are rooted in science, facts, and medical accuracy, not opinion. Thanks for listening and hope you enjoy the podcast. Topic. Should it be taught at home? Should it be taught at school? Or maybe not at all? Do we let kids figure it out? Or do we give them guidance? Our culture is filled with sexualized content and many assumptions that all teens are having sex. Is this really the case? There are definitely two publicly recognized approaches when it comes to sex education. They are sexual risk reduction, where you are trying to reduce the amount of risk that you are exposed to when it comes to sexuality. And there's another approach called sexual risk avoidance, where you can avoid the risk. Now, one might think, why are these two views polarized and at war with each other? Probably because there is federal funding that comes into play. And like any kind of politics, it's not meant to be political, but it can be politicized. So there is funding for sexual risk reduction as well as sexual risk avoidance. Now, there have been some attacks recently from the risk reduction side on risk avoidance. And all of this in the name of being aware of the future of sex education. And this is nothing new. It's been going on for a long time. However, there was an article recently released, and joining me today is Katie McNealy, and we thought we would like to talk through some of these claims and the validity that they hold. While they're talking about sexual risk avoidance, we have some questions, too, about sexual risk reduction and what they are also claiming, or at least we can speak to what they've written in this article. So we thought we would share some information, some thoughts and views based on our experience with sexual risk avoidance. That is the perspective that we are coming from, which is a universal approach to optimal health, thinking about our whole person and what is best for our whole person and what is healthiest for our young people. So, Katie, how are you today?
Oh, I'm doing fine. Thanks for having me. I am ready for this conversation.
Excellent. Okay. Well, there's a lot that's in here. Let's get started. What was, when you were first reading this, so we are referencing an article called Don't Be Fooled, Sexual Risk Avoidance in Practice. In this article, they point to some examples that are abstinence-only education. And when it comes to sexual risk avoidance, the goal is to delay sexual debut. We know that the brain is not fully developed, not fully matured until a young person is in their mid to late 20s. And it doesn't matter if we're talking about sexual activity, if we're talking about drugs, driving. I mean, think about car insurance. It's more expensive for younger teens until they get into their mid-20s and young adulthood because they are able to think more clearly, more cognitively, more critical thinking. They're using their prefrontal cortex to make logical decisions. Hopefully, that's the idea, right, with research. And so the same could be said in all of these different areas with sexual activity. The goal is to delay until they are able to make healthier choices. We recognize that they are still making decisions even now. Young people, we want them to practice good, healthy habits. But for the sake of the argument of sexual risk reduction, they really attack a couple of curriculums. And I don't want to go down that rabbit hole of attacking abstinence-only curriculum. Yes, that is an SRA, meaning avoidance curriculum, because if you wait until marriage, you're going to avoid all of the risks that sexual activity bring. But some of their claims, though, are kind of ridiculous in their attack of sexual risk avoidance. So not all sexual risk avoidance curriculums are going to be so hard on abstinence only. That is the end goal, as we know it's the optimal healthy choice. Even the CDC says The safest place for sexual activity is in a long-term, mutually monogamous relationship. And they also tag on where neither person has an STI. So, but if you're thinking about a long-term, mutually monogamous relationship, yes, people can have those relationships without marriage, but typically society would define those as marriage. And more research is coming out focused on the health benefits psychologically, cognitively, relationally for saving sexual activity until marriage. So that stood out to me. Katie, what are some of your thoughts?
Well, and one of the things, so when I read this article, I really was reading it going, wait, what? Wait, what? Where's the lie? Why is this? Why are they saying that we have a harmful message as SRA educators? What is the problem here? And so you've already alluded to that sometimes we can have pushback when we include marriage as the healthiest place for sex. And we say the healthiest for many reasons. I know that we have had a podcast before of SRA versus SRR, and even what IDFM, our curriculum, I decide for me, what we teach specifically. But the pushback on all SRA, even having that marriage, you're only saying that marriage is the only way. My flipping the script on them, the pushback for this article would be, the truth is we speak to over 6,000 students a year, and for the most part, students are still answering that they want to be married someday. Mm-hmm. So we need to talk about a healthy marriage doesn't just happen. A ring on your finger isn't magic. What will help you get to a healthy marriage? What will help you have the healthiest sex in the healthy marriage? And we don't need to just be pretending like, well, no, you're only saying that marriage is the only way. Students are wanting to get married. Young people are wanting and desiring a marriage. And we've got to set them up for how to get there in the healthiest way, and not in a way that is shaming or judging. For the most part, how many of us have stories that we wish we had known things sooner, wish we had done things differently, wish we could have been empowered to make the healthiest decision. That is what we are doing in SRA. And if they're I said I had a reaction when I read this article and just thought, no, we have to have a conversation about this. Mm-hmm. Because even to start, this report, one of the very first things says, SRA programs fail to equip young people with the knowledge and skills needed to protect their health. And when they say it like that, let's flip it a little bit. What are these knowledge and skills that they are saying that what's needed for young people to be the healthiest? My first thought, honestly, was, are they just talking about how to teach how to put on a condom? Mm-hmm. Because that, yes, reduces the risk. And we talk about that even in our SRA programming. Mm-hmm. We are living in reality. We are not wanting to make decisions for these young people. We want to present what is healthiest for them and empower them that they can make that decision for themselves, not, well, you're going to do it anyway. Here's how to use a condom to do it. Mm-hmm. And so when they talk about knowledge and skills, also, what is it actually protecting? Again, just maybe that physical health, and it's not really doing a great job at protecting. STIs are skyrocketing. Yes. A quick search on the CDC website shows us that. And so that would be the purpose of our conversation today. I want to flip the script a little bit on what they say is harmful, that what we are doing is harmful. Mm-hmm. When in reality, they are wanting to they say students need a full picture to make the decision. Abstinence and sexual debut is part of that full picture of what can be healthiest. Another thing I took beef with is that they over and over state 90% of people are having sexual activity before they're married. 90%. Mm-hmm. First of all, my first thought was, before I even did any kind of searching, was that doesn't mean that it's the healthiest thing. That is just a social norm. Yes. And because they mostly will, so we need to just equip them to do that. Yes. Doesn't make any sense. By the way, you also do a quick Google search. They are getting their data from 2015, over 10 years ago.
Is it 2026?
So this just came out. And their data they are using that they reference over and over, they're all doing it anyway. We need to make sure they're equipped. Isn't even current.
That's funny to me because one of their criticisms of SRA is that we are not medically accurate. And I'm thinking that's not statistically accurate with taking things out of context, right? Even these curriculums that they look at, it's very clear that they've pulled things. Now, you may read some of those and not like what it says, but again, out of context, it's hard to understand. But with their data, yeah, it's 2015, so it's dated. And here we are looking at pregnancy statistics from 2025. What the CDC has recently released is that these pregnancy stats have gone down, teen pregnancy stats. And even the CDC says there's speculation on reasons as to why teen pregnancy rates have gone down in the last couple of years is one, they're choosing not to be sexually active, and two, they're using contraceptives better. So that is just really interesting to me that here they're making this attack with bad data.
It does say, it was interesting, it was reviewed in 2017, but they stopped collecting it in 2015. So you can even make it sound a little. But my question, too, if they are saying we lack the knowledge and skills, we're not giving them the knowledge and skills they need for what they say they're already doing, we could give several examples of how that doesn't make sense. And it begs the question that I would give back to them. Why does the wisdom of avoiding harm and risk apply to everything but sex and sexual activity? Yes. Because we have talked about eating raw chicken is risky for salmonella. So do we only give them the knowledge and skills of what to do once they get sick? We never talk about how to avoid salmonella. Would that be the same kind of comparison? Car accidents happen all of the time. This age group even that we're talking about, it's risky to put some of them behind a wheel. But okay, are we only going to give them the knowledge and skills? This is what you do after you have an accident. Or do we talk about here's how to avoid it in the first place and avoid the risk? Do we talk about everybody gets a cold? Let's talk about only how to take care of it once you have a cold instead of, hey, if you wash your hands, there's a chance you'll avoid. So that's how I would flip the script, even in the very beginning of why does the wisdom of avoiding harm and risk not apply to sexual activity? And is it just because, well, they're going to do it anyway, which really isn't all the way true or current?
No, it's not, because the CDC, they also conduct a survey with teenagers in high school, this youth risk behavior survey. And there are questions that are asked on that. Are you sexually active? Have you had sex? How many partners have you had sex with? And they collect all of this data, and we have access to it on these dashboards. You can go online. And I think that most people would agree that the CDC, that is a valid resource to pull data and statistics. It's accurate, right? And so if you go to that dashboard and you pull that information, the majority of teenagers are not having sex. In fact, by the time they are seniors and graduating, it's only about 33% of all teens have actually had sex. And in this article, the language says nearly all teens will have sex before marriage. Well, they're not right now in high school, so that's not accurate either. I will say, as we are talking about avoiding risk, there is definitely this theme through here of normalizing teens being sexually active and STIs and pulling away the stigma. And if we look at our culture, we see so many commercials, right? HIV is a real thing. I am so glad that we have medical treatment to help people live with that. But if we were to ask those people, if you could not have HIV, would you choose to have it or not have it? And probably, now I'm making an assumption, but one would think that they would say, well, I'd rather not live with it. Yet here we are reading this article saying we need to celebrate teens having sex. We should be encouraging them and allowing them and then giving them the information on how to deal with that. Now, HIV is not the most prevalent of all the STIs. It can be deadly, But HPV is even higher. In fact, we know within months to a couple of years, you are pretty likely to have been exposed to one of the more than 200 strains of HPV. Are we going to celebrate that? Is that what our culture does? We're going to celebrate genital warts or cancer later on in life. Now, I know that we have Gardasil, and I'm, again, thankful for the medical community. But if we can talk to kids and say, you have a choice, do you want to avoid this, or do you just want to learn how to deal with it? Herpes, that's the second highest prevalent STI that's happening. That doesn't have a cure. And that can affect childbearing or childbirth, and that just can affect a lot. Now, perhaps we would have listeners that would say, well, I agree with what you're saying. Yes, they could avoid the risk. Perhaps someone might say, it's how you approach it. Like this article. They say that with SRA, the avoidance approach, we are moralizing it, that we are shaming people, that we are only talking to heterosexual married couples. Or as some would say, we're feeding into that purity campaign that was years ago. What are your thoughts when it comes to that?
Well, for the first part, to talk about when you say the people that wrote this report went into it, they do, like you said, talk about specific curriculums. My question back again to them would be, how many of these did you observe instead of just read and pick and choose some of the quotes that you took, which, by the way, we can get back to it, but one of their arguments for condoms being taught in a fear-framing way is a literal quote from the CDC about how condoms do not actually protect 100% of the time. So
they're attacking the CDC.
Yes. So my question would be, how many of these did you actually observe? Because when we teach our SRA curriculum, we are trying to the best of our ability to speak to every student, regardless of what they are currently choosing or living or have done, have chosen, that they are worth having a conversation about how to be the healthiest, no matter who or what activity they would be doing.
Yeah.
Because my question back, that if they would think we are framing this in a way that excludes anybody, they can't have observed many curriculums, or I would invite them into our classrooms, actually, because when we are speaking to these students, we want what is healthiest and best for all of them. And regardless of what you are choosing, you're worth getting to a healthiest future. And any sexual activity of any kind outside of the healthiest boundary could really be detrimental. And so that's why I would push back a little. They are assuming a lot of things about those of us that are having these conversations with students.
Yes, and there was even an attack on the success sequence. That's something that has been incorporated into sexual risk avoidance. So the success sequence is it's a formula on how to, if you live your life in this order, you have a 97% chance of not living in poverty. So you graduate, whether that's high school or college, you get a full-time job, you get married, and then you add children to that relationship, 97% chance that you, even if you're born into poverty, you can live life in this order, and it will put you in a more financially successful place. I know that that is a part of sexual risk avoidance. We are seeing many states now pushing for that. The state of Indiana, the state of Ohio has now incorporated, like they've voted on it. They're making it one of their educational standards. In the state of Indiana, they're adding it to their good citizenship standards to be taught to students because, again, it is such an empowering thing that someone can choose to do this, right? And they're going to have a healthier future. And it makes sense. I mean, we're talking financially, right? If you're just taking care of yourself and you're not having to take care of another person, your financial strain, it's going to be easier. All right. Having said all of that, you can have whatever thoughts you want on the success sequence, but there's a lot of research out there that supports that. This article also attacks that and saying where they do bring in systemic injustice. And because I was trying to understand, they also attack personal responsibility. And I kind of question what's wrong with personal responsibility. Shouldn't we all be personally responsible for ourselves? But If someone is under systemic injustice, wouldn't this be even more empowering to help them find ways that they can break that cycle or get out from under it?
Because again, let's flip the script. What is the alternative? Now, yes, I fully want to live in reality that this success sequence is not a magical thing that works for everyone. And if you follow it, everything will be just sunshine and roses in your life. If you don't follow it, you are a failure doomed to be miserable. That is not what this is about. But I do understand that, yes, I can't claim to understand what some of our students are living, what some people who feel that they wouldn't have the chances that others do. That exists. But what is the alternative? To never offer any kind of path that could lead them? And what a coworker and I were talking about earlier, we would have more of a problem with this if it also wasn't scientifically proven that even if you went out of the order, that you can work your way back to the next step and work your way out of poverty.
As you hit each milestone, even if you do it out of that order, as you hit each milestone, it does move you further away from that place of poverty. So it is scientifically backed. Like you said,
Yes.
what is the alternative? If this is a criticism, and maybe they're criticizing how it is taught, I think that's something that's really important to point out for sexual risk avoidance. And it is there's a national organization that certifies, it's called Ascend, and they certify and train people in what SRA is. And we've gone through that training. And in that training, there are two major points that they really drill into us. And one is that every person has value, intrinsic value, right? When we recognize how important we are, how important our lives are, we're going to make healthier choices to protect that. And very much we live in a culture that speaks a lot of messaging that works against that, right? And then number two, no shame. No judgment, because everybody does come from a different background. And so when we are presenting all of this information, and again, we can only speak for how we present it, but even our understanding through our training of what SRA is, there shouldn't be shame or judgment on people. It is, I am equipping you with information so that you can make healthier choices. Like we are, I guess, putting that personal responsibility on people, but without judgment for it. And I guess that comes into play here too, where they criticize a lot of SRA programs for being judgmental towards LGBTQ. And I guess I don't understand that part of it either, because the LGBTQ community is at even a higher risk of being taken advantage of, sexual criminal activity, a lot of things that are happening there, or even the STIs. And we don't talk about that because that can sound very shaming. So I know when we go into classrooms and present, we try to be very sensitive and very much listen, regardless of how you identify. There are things that are happening that you're exposing yourself to, and you are worth respecting and protecting. What are some healthy choices that you can make to help in that way? And even with marriage, we live in a country where marriage is not limited to heterosexual relationships. So what is it that they are encouraging if this is not the right approach?
And again, that students are saying they see themselves getting married. I also would have more of a problem with it if it was, the first step is graduating. I would have a problem with it more if it was with a college degree. This is at minimum high school. And in our society, we are set up to hopefully give every student a chance to have a high school diploma. Then it is a job. Then it is a marriage. We also then go into, yes, before having children, but having children is not the definition of success. You can be successful without them. You can be successful without being married. But you are setting yourself up. If you want to be married, if you desire to be married, desire to have a family, for sure, research upon research, being in a healthy marriage only sets up the children for better and better success as well. So again, right, it's kind of the question of what do you mean? What would the alternative be? And while we should be mindful that we do not fully understand everybody's stories and what they are facing, what opportunities they have and don't have, it would be something, again, that we're coming from, there is no shame in poverty. But I do not know. We ask the high schoolers and the middle schoolers some of their goals for their future. None of them are answering that they hope to be in poverty. That is not a goal that people have. They are not actively trying to get into it. So like you said, even if they're born into it, even if through choices or life circumstances it ends up that they would not be able to provide, again, the research shows just start moving towards that next step and you can pull yourself out of that situation. And we talk about, that's when we talk about first, again, you've mentioned the intrinsic value, but then having safe people in your life to have help. We have to be willing to ask for help. We have to be willing to be able to identify people in our lives when we need the help. We have to be willing to be the people that are kind of watching people in our lives that we love to step in and walk alongside. So this is such a bigger conversation than just putting this as the SRA message is actually harmful to students. It just isn't. And to go back to when you were talking about the STIs, how they are skyrocketing, I have had a thought recently because, again, we are living in reality. I think sometimes people who hear abstinence education, or even when we talk sexual risk avoidance, that it is maybe an assumption that we are walking in saying, don't have sex, okay, bye, and that's it. That's why I would welcome people to come in and then have a conversation about what we actually are talking with students about. And I did think more recently that I love that I work for a place that I'm going into a classroom hoping to empower students for the healthiest options, the healthiest choices for their whole person health. Meanwhile, living in reality and knowing that we have a place that they can come when things don't go the way that they had planned, or when they are making the decisions that aren't the healthiest and they have some consequences that they didn't expect or don't know what to do. That here at Clarity, we have the STI testing clinic and the pregnancy care center, that we personally know how caring these people are that work here and will treat them with dignity and respect. And so it is such a bigger picture than just walking in and saying, choose abstinence, nobody's having sex, we are living under a rock, just do it, and good luck.
And if you don't, bad things are going to happen to you.
And you are miserable and people are ashamed of you and you have failed. That I do think people have such an assumption about what we do.
Yes. Well, because it is funny. This article starts off with talking about how sexual risk avoidance is medically accurate and that saying that we claim to be evidence-based, medically accurate, inclusive, and youth-centered, which we are. All of those things. But then the attack is that we're moralizing that and presenting, to say that there's risk means that something is bad, that you wouldn't want it. So I guess shame on us for presenting the reality of STIs and how prevalent they're out there. But I do believe even in our language after COVID, everything went from STDs, sexually transmitted disease, to a sexually transmitted infection, an STI. And if you ask students which one sounds worse, they'll say disease. And we're like, right, because a disease is incurable. But when we look at the STIs that are out there, more of them tend to be incurable than curable. They're manageable with medication. But as you mentioned, we do have an STI testing clinic here. And a lot of our patients that come in or clients that come in, they will say they have regret, right? They wish that they had known. They wish they hadn't made that decision. They are not glamorizing or normalizing the STI that they have. And it's not just a physical response. Yes, your physical body is experiencing this, the symptoms, but it affects us so much more. And we haven't even really mentioned that with this optimal health and whole person health. The choices we make, we're going to have thoughts about. We're going to have feelings from that. Of course, we feel our feelings in our body. It may have occurred because of a relationship that we're in. And it could have even been an ethical thing. So, I mean, our whole person, physical, intellectual, emotional, social, ethical. But all of that, I mean, we can't say that a sexual choice is just going to be It feels good, so we do it, and there's a physical consequence, and it's not going to affect me in any other part of my person. It does. It shapes and it molds us. And it psychologically, there are chemicals that are being released in the brain. And if we're thinking about long-term relationships, and we bring that in, what is a healthy relationship and an unhealthy relationship? And if we're talking about goals, a lot of students do plan to get married one day. Well, we've got to work towards that too. What kind of a relationship do we want? We don't just luck into the best relationship ever and never have to work on ourselves too. Friendship, any kind of relationship. So it's interesting to me that there's a lot of research out there that does support abstinence until marriage. There are reports even coming out here recent showing that marriage is healthier if there's been abstinence beforehand. Now, if you want to say, well, person never plans to get married, okay, so then marriage is not a future goal that they're working towards, how would you flip the switch on that? Well, I can be sexually active if I want because I don't care about getting married.
So here would be the way that I would flip the script on that, because over and over this year in classrooms, when I would ask students, what do you want for your adult life? We don't start with adult life. We start small. Like, let's have some goals for maybe the next week, because we're not becoming all new people in a week. Then let's talk a year from now. Then let's talk after high school. Then let's talk adult. And so we're asking those, what are some goals that you have? What do you want your adult life to be like? What do you picture? What do you want? And do you know the word stable keeps coming up over and over? They want stability. Mm-hmm. Stability. Now, so my answer to that would be even the people that don't desire marriage are probably answering that they want stability. Mm-hmm. And so I would then I really do ask in classrooms, so what does stable mean to you? What does that mean? What do you mean? Something you can count on, something that doesn't change, something that they know can withstand. They have really good answers. And so then to flip the script on SRA being harmful, but what is the alternative? How does sexual freedom, multiple partners, having sex with people before you end up in a long-term relationship, how does that support stability? And what we are practicing now affects our future. And if we would be practicing things, if we want stability later in life, we got to start practicing that now in our relationships now. And I would be so curious to flip the question on them of how does SRR, that they're going to do it anyway. So let's just provide them with contraceptives. Let's just make sure they're being safer, which, by the way, hearing that word over and over has got to be an influence of, no, it's fine. It's like it'll be okay. Hearing safer sex, it used to be safe sex. But now I hear over and over, I'm reading safer sex. Like I don't actually know when that shift happened. And I don't know if you've been seeing that in articles that you've read, but I see safer now. So they are catching on that what they are saying, it is not safe sex just to use contraceptives.
Because there is some risk still.
It is safer, and we talk about that as well. But that would be the way I would flip the script on if the goal of so many of our young people is stability. How is sexual freedom, multiple partners, thinking that, do what you want and you'll settle down when you get married, how is that helping them reach the goal of stability? It's what they're saying they want.
Well, Katie, I have really enjoyed this conversation that we've had. And for our listeners, I think you can see there's a lot that goes into this when we read an article or hear some information. It does demand that you do a little bit more research. And I know that we are all going to have some different opinions and views because even with the sexual risk reduction and sexual risk avoidance can be very polarized. And at other times, I think we can agree with different pieces and adapt different parts of it. Not that I'm saying we should compromise what we do, but just this article alone, I mean, even to make this one statement, they've taken certain curriculums out of context and attacked all of sexual risk avoidance education. But yet there are some flaws in their own approach, too, in that they're not really medically accurate or up to date. And I will say, we can't speak for all presenters or educators of sexual risk avoidance, but we are taught and we are encouraged to not be shaming, to speak to all people, and to present medically accurate facts and data, because it doesn't matter what a person hears, they're going to make their own decisions. So let's give them information in a way that they're willing to hear it. We're not going to moralize it. We know that we have students that sit in a classroom. They may not come from any kind of a faith base, and we're not presenting from a faith-based stance. We're looking at research. I will just throw this in here too, because I've thought about this as we've had our conversations. Many of our students, when they give us responses after viewing our presentation, they have opportunity that they could tell us if they feel like we've moralized it or shamed them, or any of the arguments that are in this article. We really don't get those. We don't. What we do see are students thanking us and appreciating the information on how to recognize an unhealthy relationship and what to look for in a healthy relationship, as well as the risks that go with sexually transmitted infections, even the emotional risks that come from that as well. And a lot of these students, we're talking to them in health classes, and I'm not saying that health teachers and curriculums aren't doing a good enough job. I think they are presenting the information. Sometimes it goes in one ear and out the other, but we are giving them more of a context to understand, what does this look like now and in your future, and how are the choices we're making today going to affect and shape that? Which I guess does come down to some personal responsibility, but I don't think that that's a bad thing to encourage, because even if they make the decision to be sexually active, they need to understand what that can look like. And I think we are equipping them with that information. So I don't know. It's a tough world out there. Everyone's going to have an opinion, but hopefully we've shed some light on some of this and helped flip the script a little bit and ask some questions back to really understand. And I think, for parents, if your students are in a class where they're talking about sexual education, let me really encourage you, have a conversation, ask them some questions, ask them what they think and why do they think that. Hey, thanks for listening. This podcast is brought to you by Clarity of Central Indiana. We hope you enjoyed today's topic. Be sure to leave us a review and share with your friends. You can find any links mentioned in the episode notes. Always remember that you have value, you have worth, you matter.